Getting a job in 2026 is a real pain, and it never always used to be like that, even until pretty recently. Hey, and welcome to my video series where I speak every day for sort of 10ish minutes unscripted, following, what was inspired by a video series that I'll link in the description. But this will be the first episode where I actually discuss a topic which isn't on the recommended list that I've been trying to follow. I'm going off script for this unscripted video series, and I'm going to talk about work in 2026 and getting a job, because for my main job, I work as a scientist. I've worked at this job for almost 10 years now, which is probably an eternity to most people. It's a really good job. The pay isn't amazing, but the employee benefits are incredible, and half the time I can just do what I want and manage my own time. But recently I have been trying to get some part-time extra work, on the weekends and evenings, or just working around my regular shift, because they're really flexible, which is, I understand, a rarity in these days. It's almost like the opposite is the common thing these days. The jobs are inflexible, but they want you to be available whenever. So I've been trying to get some weekend work in. Just anything really, so retail, fast food, anything along those lines. Like, there was one I saw in the post office last night. I haven't applied for that yet, but maybe I'll apply for that. And I've applied for jobs before and been through the application process, and something just feels different now. And I don't think it's going to get any better the way I'm looking at things, and it's really unfortunate for the current young people. So the Gen Z people who are entering the workforce and such, or maybe they're establishing their careers, or finishing university or college recently. And the Gen Alphas, I think they're gonna be affected the most, unless there's some significant change in the next few years in terms of jobs and employment. And yeah, I like to talk about this really. I'll talk about my experience, and you can hear how things used to be back in from 2006 onwards. So I'd say my first real job that I got, which wasn't, a paper round or just working in my parents' office, or they didn't own the office, they just somehow managed to get me a job in like the post room there where they worked. But my first real job was in retail. It was in a small corner shop, or a convenience store as you'd call it, called the Co-op, which is a chain of like shops in the UK, kind of like, the big ones like Tesco and such, but it's only a smaller one most of the time. And most of the time things there are more expensive than in normal shops, kind of irritatingly. Now, I got this job in 2006, I'm fairly sure. Maybe it was earlier. I should have researched these things before I start talking about them. But the way I got this job, I was still in secondary school, so high school at the time. I just went down there, asked if they had any weekend jobs available for a school student, and I just got the job immediately. There wasn't really an interview process. They were like, yeah, thanks, little warm keyboard, sounds good, you can start this Sunday. And that was it. I guess there was some kind of administrative process in the background, but it must have been much more casual than it is these days. Like, there was no like apps or phones or anything back in those days. This actually predated smartphones, if you can imagine that. The internet wasn't really commonly used by people. So I just popped down there, no CV, no application process, just turned up, willing to work. I had my school uniform on, so, impressed them. Maybe I was dressed smarter than the average, scoundrel. But yeah, that's how it went. The pay was garbage. I got paid £3 an hour, and I was thinking back on that recently, that maybe with inflation that wasn't too bad, but £3 an hour back then is the equivalent of like £5.30 an hour now. So it was garbage. I was definitely just getting exploited, but I was very, very young, and it started 6 hours a week. I'd work 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. on a Sunday, which eventually expanded to also 6 hours on Saturday evening. So I'd work 4 p.m. till 10 p.m. on Saturday, and that was the close time of the shop. And that's what I did for a couple of years when I was at high school. I absolutely hated it, but I needed the money for things in general, like as soon as I hit 16, my parents stopped buying me food and cooking food for me. They let me live in the house still, but they didn't do anything else. I was just on my own. I had to buy my own car, pay for my own driving lessons, pay for my own fuel, get myself to what we call college. So that's where I did my A levels, my 16 to 18 age qualifications. And yeah, I just worked there for a couple of years, and it was easy. At the time, I thought, damn, this is tough. I have to go there and ask for a job, but I don't think that would happen at all these days. I couldn't even imagine that happening in where I work at the moment. People would just say like, no, sorry, check online, something along those lines. But yeah, I worked that job until I started university at 18. So I stopped working there. And in some way I kind of regret that because, well, looking back on it, I did drop out of university the first time. I would have benefited much more by just working full-time after work until I decided, after my A-level qualifications, and until I decided what I truly wanted to do. But there was, of course, a lot of pressure back then, and still today, to go to university and get a degree, which, of course, I didn't get. So after I failed my first degree, it was a pretty similar process. I went to a supermarket called Marks and Spencer and asked if they had any part-time work, and I should really have gone for full-time work, but they had temporary work available. I think I had to go through an online process at the time where, it started creeping in, where you have to fill in a series of questions, you upload your CV, you then have to put in the information that's on your CV a second time. But they got back to me immediately and got me an interview, and yeah, I just got the job for a few years. And again, it was very similar. I just worked there easily. And this actually was, if you recall, there was the financial crisis in 2008. So getting a job was actually much more challenging compared with my first little job when I was working in the convenience store. And I was terrified. I was like, damn, I had to apply for at least 2 or 3 jobs before I got this job, because there were a couple of other jobs I applied for by just handing in CVs and such. Didn't hear anything. I was like, damn. I actually even tried to join the army, but they wouldn't let me in on account of my poor eyesight. So my life would have taken a massive turn then. I wouldn't even be making these videos now. My life would be completely different. But oh well, it's one of those things. Perhaps in the future I'll make a video on the choices in my life, the defining choices in my life that changed how things turned out. But yeah, I thought that was really tough at the time, applying for multiple jobs and then having to do an online selection process. I had to attend an interview with a role play, and then I got the job straight away. Like, they gave me the job after the first round of interviews. There weren't multiple rounds of interviews as there seem to be these days. I can't believe that. But yeah, then I had that job for a while, went to university again, eventually finished university, and once again I had to apply for jobs because I was at a point where I was the only person in my family living in the country. Like, most of my family had moved away. They were all overseas. Not because they are from overseas or my family. We're all from the UK, but they just wanted to live overseas, which is fair pay, I guess. So I didn't have a full back plan of living with my family. So I basically had to get a job. I was on a timer. So I applied for a lot of jobs this time. I applied for because I did a science-based degree, every science-based job I could find in the country. I went to interviews all over the place. And I remember the application process was fairly similar to the Marks and Spencer's job, so the second job I got, whereby most of the time you fill in your CV, give them the CV and a cover letter online, fill in some questions and such online, and then you get an interview. And I got an interview for pretty much every job I applied for, somehow. Some weren't even entry level, and they just gave me an interview. I guess they just had to interview a certain number of people, even though they probably weren't going to employ me. And yeah, the first job I was actually offered, I accepted. It wasn't the very first job I was interviewed for, but it was the first one I was successful in an interview for, and that's the one I work at now. Sort of. Well, I've climbed the ranks a bit. When I first started, it's a strange story. I applied for one job. At the interview, they decided that they liked me, but I wasn't suitable for the job I was interviewed for, which they must have known from my CV. But they just created a new entry-level job for me as a result. And I can't imagine that happening anymore ever again in this institution or any similar institutions. They're not going to create a new job for someone because Like, no one has any money these days. No companies have any money. They're not gonna. I don't think that's gonna happen. A few years afterwards, someone applied for this job once I had progressed through the ranks, and the person who was successful had a PhD and multiple postdocs under their belt. So I don't know why they were applying for an entry-level job, but the competition is like fierce for these jobs now. And yeah, that leads me to where I am today then. So I've been applying for these fast food jobs, convenience store jobs, just for weekend and evening work. And the process is absolutely insane. I have to do all kinds of things. There's like AI parts of the interview, or the application process where I'm chatting to an AI. Of course, I have to upload the CV, answer the questions, give examples of things I've been up to, or I do, why I want to work there, why I'm passionate about working in, a fast food place for the weekend, that sort of thing. I just want the money really, and some discounts, I suppose. That's always good. But I've only heard back from one company so far, and that's been a convenience store. There's Tesco's, little Tesco's, which is a couple of miles away, so I'd rather not work there, but I thought I'd give it a chance. And the only reply I got was a phone call, which I missed, from someone with such a thick Scottish accent calling from an unknown number. And I think what they said was they're sorry they missed me and they'll call me back some other time. So, yeah, that's where I am now. Again, I'm not desperate for the money, but I have this irrational fear that we're all kind of cooked in the future. Like, the pensions aren't going to be as glorious for us as they are for the older generation. So I'm doing everything I can to pump up my pension, my investments, all those bits and bobs, so I have at least a small chance of not living in poverty in my old age. But yeah, I'd say that, what advice can I gain from this? Every single round I went through, so from 2006, 2008, and so on and so forth, job hunting got harder and harder. So I guess the only silver lining is now is the easiest time in the next 5 years, I suppose. I think things are just going to get tougher and tougher, unfortunately. So I guess apply for jobs now where you can. If you have a job, keep it. And always just keep an eye out for other things you can apply for. That's the best I can do at the moment. So yeah, sorry if that was a bit of a depressing end. Talking this to myself, it's just tragic. But thanks for listening. And yeah, it's Friday today for me, so from tomorrow and the day after, I've got to try and record from home. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.